Hello. Welcome to another episode of Ancient Office Hours by the Ozymandias Project. Trireme Transit is now boarding for all new and returning passengers. Now departing, present ponderings. Next stop is Ancient Office Hours at a library lost in the sands of time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 88 of Ancient Office Hours. This week, my guest is Dr. Sabrina Higgins, a professor of archaeology and art history at Simon Fraser University. She completed her PhD in religious studies at the University of Ottawa with a focus on the material evidence for the cult of the Virgin Mary in late antique Egypt, a project she is currently transforming into her first monograph. She is also an active field archaeologist, having excavated at various sites in North Macedonia, Egypt, Bulgaria, and Greece. More broadly, she is also interested in the ways in which art and space interact within late antique Christian religious structures and the manner in which art is used by socially marginalized populations to exert agency. In this episode, we discuss misconceptions about the Virgin Mary, her experience researching the cult of Mary and the Marian interpretation in Egypt, biblical themes and the Da Vinci Code, and her work with peopling the past. I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and review us on Apple or Spotify. Awesome. Thanks for joining me this morning. So I just want to start out and ask you, where or when did you get into, all things ancient history, classics, anything ancient world?
So quite late, if I'm being honest. I had no intention of being an archaeologist when I was young. I was really good at science. And so everyone thought that I was going to be some kind of doctor. I don't think they thought I would go this direction. But I started my university career in health science, of all things. And a semester into my degree, realized I hated it. That was not for me. And then I literally, at the University of Ottawa, I picked up their course catalog, flipped through it, and saw a class called Athens, Persia, Sparta, and decided that was what I was going to do with my life. Having never taken an ancient history class before, ever, but I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do right there. And so, halfway through my very first semester, I switched my degree, finished my classes, and never looked back. And I fell in love with the ancient world. And I think in the summer after my third year, I went on my first excavation with Angus Smith at Brock University, and he changed my life. And I just decided then and there that I was going to be an archaeologist, and this is what I was going to do.
That's great. I love that you just see the name of a class. Usually I feel like I hear people are like, oh yes, I took this class and it changed my life. No, I love how you go, just the title.
Yeah. Just tell me more about this, please.
I was going to say, because what was it about that title? Was it just like you had an interest in these places and it sounded cool? So you were like, yep, actually, I want to study this because you just realized that you like the idea of it?
Yeah, pretty much. I thought, I was one of those kids who I watched a lot of History Channel and National Geographic. And so I was broadly aware of the ancient world, but it never occurred to me that it was something I could seriously study, right? No one in high school tells you that you could be a classics major. In fact, you're actively discouraged from doing anything other than sciences, right? So to go to university and to just flip through the course catalog and see a title of these places that had always really intrigued me as a kid, it just kind of blew my mind that I could study that. And we didn't have anything like Percy Jackson or any of these movies. Really, I graduated my undergrad a long time ago. I mean, Indiana Jones was the reference point at that point. But from watching History Channel, I was like, this is so cool. This is so intriguing. I wish I could do that, but it was never something that anyone told me was even an option. So just seeing that changed my life. That was just a course I could take.
Oh, that's so cool. And was it always archaeology, or did you flirt with the idea of doing something not archaeology?
I mean, I flirted with the idea of classics more broadly until I did my first excavation. I loved ancient history. And then I think one of the things that really drew me to archaeology was, one, the language requirements were less intense. And I can do Greek and Latin, but, give me dirt and sun any day. I'd much rather be out in the field. And so, when I got my first archaeological experience and I got to really, be hands-on and excavate things out of the ground that people hadn't seen for 3,000 years, we were digging a Minoan site. I mean, it was magical. I mean, once I got that aspect where I could travel, which I love, work outside, which I love, and kind of have like that little bit of detective work, I was done. I was sold.
Nice. Yeah. No, it makes sense too, because I feel like people who come from kind of some sort of science background also, I feel like, now there's no research I have done that will prove it, but I feel like the majority of the people I talk to who like science and came from some sort of background are the ones who go into archaeology, and it's the people who come from like, oh, I was an English or a drama major or something, that are like the ones who are, oh yes, I had to become a philologist because I had to.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not actually that black and white.
I think a lot of it too is, I mean, science in many ways is so multifaceted, right? There's so many directions you can go in. And the thing I like about archaeology is that you kind of have to be a jack of all trade. You have to have basic understanding of science to do work in the laboratories, if that's the direction you go in. Basic knowledge of geology and all of this stuff always intrigued me. So like I could get a degree in an arts field while still having base interests in sciences.
Yes, I do love my archaeologist colleagues because they can do such cool things. I flirted with the idea of going into archaeology, and then my very first class, I was like, oh, this is a little too sciencey for me, I think. I was never good at science. So I was like, oh, darn. Well, I guess that's out. But you know what? Hurting my back digging in a trench did not appeal to me either, to be fair. So I was like, I will stick with ancient history. I will be fine. And you know what? That's the great thing about the field. Like, it's so interdisciplinary. I was like, you know what? I can have archaeologist friends. And
Absolutely.
I can just ask them, can you check this out? Or what did you find? Without having to, go and dig myself. So it was fun.
Right?
It was fun.
And like, as you get older, it gets a lot harder. Like, now I'm like in the field, I'm like, you got to ice my back. Where's the Tylenol? I'm in pain. Like, there's a lot of things that come along with being an archaeologist that you don't foresee at first.
I mean, it's like doing sports, right? It's like you're playing sports, and then suddenly if you're playing football and you're on the bench or whatever, and then you're like, okay, time for backup because I'm in pain. I'm old. You need to take me out, coach. Like, let's go.
Yeah, now, like I used to jump into my trench all the time. Like, give me a wheelbarrow, give me a pickaxe. And I'm like, I'm very content to be here with my notebook. Just taking notes.
You move the thing and I will annotate what you're doing. Sure.
That's why we recruit all these young kids, right? To keep the perpetual young blood in archaeology so that they can do the backbreaking labor when we physically can't anymore.
See, it's perfect. It's perfect. Now, okay, so you do like archaeology, which is wonderful. Now, how did you choose the time period? Because I believe you do later antiquity, right?
I do, yeah. I'm like proper late antiquity.
Oh, okay. So why that? Because I feel like most people are like, no, I want to study like golden age, classical period, something.
Yeah. So I think it has to do with like combining two of my interests. So technically, when I switched into classics very shortly after in my undergrad, I also took I guess it was called a concentration in religious studies. And my PhD is technically in religious studies. So archaeology is kind of, at this point, not what I received my formal degree training in at my PhD, although I guess my MA is in archaeology. So I'm kind of just like all over the place, bouncing between my interests. And I always knew that I wanted to combine the two. And so doing late antique archaeology was really appealing to me because I could sort of situate myself within the historical period that I was interested in, which is, early Christianity, sort of post Chalcedon and 431, and still do archaeological fieldwork. And so I really get to meld a lot of this. And then part of my other training for my PhD was also art history. So I kind of have like this trifecta of interest between religious studies, art history, and archaeology that I wanted to bring together. And it was nice that I could actually do that in a time period that was interesting to me. Like, I love Greece and Rome. Don't get me wrong. Like, I teach Greek and Roman material, but like my heart is in late antiquity.
Interesting. I mean, I love meeting people who have interests that are like not the norm, because I feel like the majority of people who are in this field, right? They are really the Greece and Rome people who want to do either the early stuff, because then there's, the gaggle of archaeologists, right, who are like, they're the people who come out and I feel like they say things like, there is nothing more interesting or more amazing in this world than to unlock the secrets of Bronze Age collapse. And you're like, and that's all lovely and wonderful. There are a lot of people who would probably like to say that, but not a lot who would admit, yes, I go much later. I'm sorry. All those people are dead. It's over. We've moved on a bit. So considering that you are one of the people who get to do the later stuff, it was not one of my interests. So I can't say as I understand what, draws people to that. But yeah, what was it for you? Like, was there a certain person or building, artifact, place, something that really drew you?
If I'm being incredibly honest, I think it's because I'm a lapsed Catholic. And what drew me to that is like, I really got interested in sort of the history of Christianity as an undergraduate student, kind of exploring religion from a historical perspective. Like that really changed the way that I saw the world. And then when I was taking archaeology and I had a whole gaggle of professors at the University of Ottawa, which happens to be, the network, the Center for Late Antiquity in North America, we weren't just talking about Greece and Rome. We were kind of like also talking about these late antique sites. And I got a sense that, I could pursue my interests in archaeology outside of the traditional sort of Greek and Roman framework, because it was so interesting to me having these really frank discussions about, the history of religion. And for me, I think my mind has always worked on a more material culture level. Like that's how I understand things, like really tangibly. And I thought like, oh, maybe I can actually combine these interests and like take a more like physical material approach to religion. So I don't think it was one thing. It was just like me more wanting to explore a religion that always been sort of a part or adjacent to my life from a material level.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and it's really cool. And actually, that's even cooler to me personally because, I didn't go on that exact journey, but I got very lucky. And so my final year of undergrad, I did like a random roommate match thing to live off campus. And the girl and I eventually became best friends, but she was not, I don't want to say like a fully lapsed Catholic, but she was like the Catholic who, would go to mass like once a month. And then if she was maybe more motivated, it would be like twice a month, but not really. And on the surface, like we couldn't have been more different. Here I am, like a liberal girl from Chicago coming down to rural Missouri being like, all right, I'm going to study the ancient world. And here she is kind of coming from a conservative family in Missouri, and she's an economics major and wants to go into politics. And I was like, okay, we're so different. How is this going to work? And then we found common ground because I'm from a Jewish family. She's from Catholic family. And I remember we just started having these great discussions kind of in our apartment at night or whatever about sort of like the history of the religions and how practices from Judaism turned into Catholicism. And like through that year, we decided we wanted to learn more about each other's sort of, faith history, whatever. And so I started to approach and ask her questions really about like the history of the Catholic Church, and I was like, oh, I don't know. I should look at this more historically because I don't understand the religion part, and that's fine. Yeah. And so, yeah, just like doing that, I totally get it from where you're coming because like that's really cool. So I can totally see that as a cool point of entry. Now, like our discussions, right, they were limited and to that year. And so we didn't get a lot of time. So it's as someone who got to go further in that journey, was there one certain aspect of sort of the tradition and the practices and the beliefs within Catholicism that you found really intriguing that lended itself really easily to studying from a historical point?
Yeah, definitely. So this is maybe more in retrospect, I think, like thinking back on like what that one point was. But for me, my main research interest is the material culture of the Virgin Mary, predominantly in Egypt. And I had no intention of ever studying the Virgin Mary. Like truly, this was not, I never thought I would devote my life to the Virgin, again, as a lapsed Catholic, but here we are. And then I took a class my very first semester of my PhD with a man named Theo DeBrun, who like changed my life. Like he was doing this side research project on the Virgin Mary that he like offered this class once, and it just happened to be the year that I took it. And, you know, we started talking about the Virgin Mary, again, from a historical standpoint. And what kept coming up was how limited our evidence for her, let's say, prominence was in the first few centuries. And, as someone who grew up in the Catholic tradition, went to Catholic school, up until the end of elementary school, I didn't understand that. She'd always been this figure, this massive figure. And like, my mom is French Catholic, like the Virgin Mary is huge in French Catholicism. And to me, I think I'd always just assumed she was much more prominent than she was. So we started taking these classes, realizing that, she only appears a handful of times in the Bible. It's not always positive. Okay, that's interesting. Then when do you start seeing this like broader cult or interest building up? And, it takes several centuries. And like, that just blew my mind as a PhD student. Then I thought, okay, well, if it took that long to develop a sort of cult or general work devotion for Mary, how much longer did it take for the material evidence for Marian devotion to emerge? And that led me down this whole long path, which, is why sort of I'm entrenched in late antiquity, because really it's not, at least in Egypt, until about the 5th century at the earliest, and like really into the 6th and 7th. And so that kind of just got me. And like, I completely changed my PhD topic based on this one class, like this kind of exploration I took during this class, and decided like, I need to know like about physical evidence for cult, because as a, sort of young, naive student at the time, I couldn't comprehend that the way that I had viewed my world for so long growing up with, the Virgin Mary being sort of this prominent figure within Catholicism, like that her physical veneration didn't really manifest until almost 6 centuries after Jesus was born.
Ooh, okay.
Right?
That's like, whoa, mind
It was like life-changing. It was a life-changing moment.
No, that's so cool. Yeah, well, you get a pretty skewed view, especially if you're not like within that sector. You don't grow up around anyone with that as well. Growing up in a Jewish family, we didn't really read past the 5 books of Torah. We were kind of like, right? Okay, and it ends. And I was like, well,
and it's done.
I know there's more.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't go past. I'm like, you just ignore that, So you're like, okay. In tracking kind of where she starts to show, like the physical, right? Kind of starts to show up. I could see where the art history might come in. So were you looking at specific objects, or were you kind of just trying to track like, okay, where does she show up? Is it on, household artifacts? Does it show up in, like church decorative mosaics or something? Like, were you looking at individual things, or like just like tracking everything? Where does she show up on anything? Is she in manuscripts? Is she ever presently somewhere else?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of both. So I started with a like broader historical overview of, Marian veneration from my introduction of my thesis. And then I kind of had to choose like the 3 biggest topics. So I predominantly looked at inscriptions, sort of epigraphy more broadly, that mentioned churches dedicated to the Virgin. So I was looking for like really tangible manifestations of veneration or cult. So inscriptions predominantly that attest to Marian churches, and papyri as well. Again, Egypt being sort of this beautiful hotbed of archaeological evidence. So inscriptions and papyri mentioning churches. And then I went to look at the actual like archaeological evidence for churches that we know were dedicated to Mary, dating between 5th and 9th century, and then wall paintings, broadly speaking. So churches, houses, catacombs, whatever. There's this whole other category of images that I just couldn't touch because it would have been too long, that we're kind of dealing with now through a separate side project. But no, that's sort of where it started.
Interesting. And tell me a little bit more about what's there to be found in Egypt, because I think connecting so many different places, locations, and things together, it's very fascinating, but we don't always see the connection. And so, I feel like classics and ancient Near Eastern studies are a bit closer than some of the other ones, but still, so Egypt, what is there that you can tangibly look at that, you don't have in Greece or
yeah. I mean, definitely the papyri. That, I mean, is really the most evidence that I found for my research. So I have, oh gosh, I haven't looked at the number exactly in a long time, but I'm going to say nearing 200 references to Mary to Marian buildings and papyri and inscriptions, spread out all throughout Egypt. Then less so in terms of like physical buildings that remain. And a lot of that is, you have, let's say, legends or oral histories that relate specific buildings to the Virgin, but there's nothing in the archaeology or the historical records that can tangibly link them. So that's a little bit harder, right? And then, so we have maybe 3 churches, I think, that still exists today between the 5th and the 9th century that we can definitively say were dedicated to the Virgin. And then for the wall paintings, yeah, those are amazing. They are so varied in their subject. Really, none of them are the same. And you get the Virgin in all different kinds of positions, with these double compositions with Christ on top and the Virgin Mary on the bottom. Sometimes they're sitting side by side as adults. You get a lot of the breastfeeding, Mary breastfeeding Jesus, which is really kind of unique to the Egyptian tradition. Yeah, Egypt's just a hotbed of objects that we can trace to the Virgin, largely because of its, the way it's preserved, right? This sort of hot, arid desert sands lend itself really well to preservation. So we get lucky there.
And that comes almost as a bit of a shock to me, because I feel like, when I think of Egypt, I think of, well, it's been Muslim for such a long time, except for obviously the Coptic Christians, which are still there. But yeah, no, I guess traditionally I wouldn't have at all assumed that would be a hotbed for remaining evidence. I mean, yes, the desert helps, but just the fact that there is stuff anyway to preserve. I would have been like, oh, well, I guess if you want to go study Mary, I feel like my first thought would have been, you got to go study the Byzantine period.
Absolutely.
Because that seems more, like, slap you in the face with, oh, of course she'd be there. I mean, and that also leads me to think, it's interesting. Like, I wonder how much evidence, like, could you have just as easily gone and just been like, okay, what's in modern day Turkey alone, or what's in the rest of Asia Minor? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like
that's so right. And I think one of the reasons why I avoided the Byzantine period is because it was a little bit oversaturated. So much research has been done on the Byzantine Mary, but there are actually very few of us specifically working on the cult of Mary in Egypt. It's kind of nice to be a part of this, new emerging subset of Mariologists who are taking a different approach. And I'm actually working on a broader project. I have a big grant to bring 3 different regions together to have us kind of start this dialogue. So I'm bringing the Egyptian material with the Byzantine material, but also with the Syriac material, which is another hotbed of Marian veneration. So we're trying to see when veneration of Mary emerges in all 3 regions, and are they interacting? How does it do so differently? Is it around the same time? And you actually get sort of very different chronological trajectories for the cult of Mary in all of these 3 places, and different people are kind of pushing Marian agendas, if you will.
I mean, as evidenced by a lot of popular culture and other things, Mary is always a hot topic of debate for interesting reasons. So, and I do want to get to it eventually, but I do have to kind of ask, like, so having looked at so many different aspects of the cult of Mary, and I'm sure collaborating and seeing what other people have written, so has studying her brought a greater appreciation for the figure of Mary to you? Is there something like that you've discovered that sort of makes her like super cool, even cooler than you thought before? Or are you just like, no, just I'm taking it like any other thing. I study Mary. It's cool. Great.
That's a really good question. I mean, I will say, I have been working with the Virgin Mary since I started my PhD. So what was that? 2009. I'm really going to date myself. And it never bores me. I mean, truly, it's been, over a decade of doing this kind of work. And I still love this topic. And I don't know what it is. I think there's nothing in particular that gets me more excited than anything else. I feel like just every day that I get to work with this material is a good day. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I think when you just find your research passion, that's what it is. And going and exploring that, it really should be fun. And I mean, maybe the part that I really get the most joy out of is probably the art history. I mean, to me, there's something really interesting about seeing the ways in which different people, across geographic locations, but even within an area, like Egypt or within a singular monastery, have different conceptions about how they want to portray her. And that always really interests me.
Hey, that's awesome. I think any other researcher would be like, yes, I agree. If you find a thing that makes you never get tired and you're always excited, that is a good thing. Because I think
exactly
if you get tired of your subject, then maybe it's not the right one for you, or you need a break.
Yeah. And I think there's just infinite possibilities with Mary, right? There's so many directions that you can go here and so many places that you can tap into in terms of geographic location or time period. So yeah, it's pretty infinite in terms of what you can do.
Yeah, so, it sounds like, hey, she's pretty cool to study. Now, has your specialization, though, led to any, fun little mishaps where people will start asking you all these religious questions, thinking that you sort of study her on, not so much a historical, but, on sort of the more religious basis, and do you find yourself having to be like, no, I'm not, a pure, religious scholar, no. I can't answer this question. Stop asking me the religion part. I don't know.
More than you would think. I think a lot of people who come up to me and are interested in my work, whether if that's, they've read my research or, we just happen to have an exchange on the street. There's often this perception that when you study religious material, you come at it from a theological perspective. And I'm not sure that anyone outside of academia necessarily realizes that there's a whole other field of the history of religion. So, I'll often get asked, if I went where I studied theology, or I didn't, not at all. Yeah. So I just try to redirect and talk about it more from a historical perspective and think about ways in which that might be more interesting than necessarily from a strictly theological point of view, because it gives us all of this extra contextual information that doesn't necessarily have to go against someone's religious beliefs, right? But it's interesting in terms of helping me communicate a framework in which I think about religion. And it's something that, I try to be sensitive about, especially because I'm going to be teaching a class on the cult of the Virgin Mary next semester, for the first time. And I think it's going to attract a lot of students who probably come from pretty religious backgrounds, right? And I'm not there to challenge anyone's religious beliefs, but what I am there to do is put those religious beliefs into their historical context. And that's kind of how I try to approach those interactions.
That's really cool. And I mean, I just, I think that just due to the nature of what you study definitely puts you in that position more than others. But, no one's immune to it. I was having a great conversation the other day with Jackson Crawford, and he, as a prominent scholar of Old Norse language and history and culture and stuff, he gets asked all the time if he's pagan. And he's like, no, you don't have to be something to study something, but I can see where that gets mixed up. And, if he gets it and it's not the most obvious, I can only imagine what it would be like if you're like, oh, yes, I study the Virgin Mary. So, no, it's interesting to think about, though, how many people get asked because the perception is that it would be too hard, right, to separate personal beliefs or whatever from the academic study.
Absolutely.
And if you don't do it, then it's even harder.
Yeah, I think it would be very difficult for me personally to do that. And I have a lot of colleagues who study the Virgin Mary who are very religious. And I've seen this especially with my colleagues who study, the Byzantine tradition and are themselves Orthodox. And so you do get a lot of people who are very heavily invested in studying the Virgin Mary because of their religious beliefs. But I think that makes for the most interesting conversations, right? So, we can have really interesting historical questions and conversations about Mary while still legitimizing, where each other are coming from.
Yeah, no, I agree. It makes definitely for some of the best conversation. Now, I did, because it's been in the back of my mind, I can't not bring it up now. So, does the movie Da Vinci Code make you cringe, or do you just laugh and find it awesome because of the emphasis on Mary?
Okay, so I have a internally complex relationship with the Da Vinci Code, and one that I can't believe I'm admitting to. So I think, to be honest, the Da Vinci Code is what got me into religious studies, because it came out right around the time when I switched into religious studies, because I was like, this is so cool. Like, oh my goodness, what a way to think about religion. And then I took my religious studies classes and was like, oh, I feel slightly ashamed of what brought me here. So I have to kind of thank the Da Vinci Code for like getting to me where I'm at. And then also like do a lot of self-reflection on like why I actually believed any of that may have been valid.
But I mean, it's written in a way like all good like movies are, though, right? Because if you are watching something and if you're able to turn off the history part of your brain and the reality part, and if you kind of allow yourself to be taken by that narrative, they did such a good job, especially that one scene with the great Ian McKellen. He could sell me anything. He could
anything.
Sell
literally anything.
Right. I was like, he could sell the ocean a cup of water like it needs more. But so that brilliant scene where he goes on that diatribe and is just like, oh, Robert, you horrible person, you do not believe, and I will explain to you why this makes sense. I remember the first time I watched that, I was like totally into it, and I was like,
right?
Wait, that sounds like something that could technically be right. Also because it's like an art history interpretation you're looking at. He like pulls up the painting and you're like, well, when he moves the figures and it makes sense. I was like, well, actually, look at the negative space. I was like, totally into it. Right.
And I think one of the things that like really got me into religious studies through this movie was that art historical scene, because like, okay, at that point I'd been in class 6 for like a semester. We were doing art history, and then 19-year-old Sabrina was like, oh, you can do art history and religious studies together. This is amazing. And so like I switched, and then, we had classes where like people ripped apart the Da Vinci Code. And I was like, you know what? Who cares that I thought this movie was amazing? Like, that is what got me here. And this is it for the exact same reason. I will never rip on Percy Jackson or Troy or 300. Like, that gets my students in the room every time. And then we'll talk about it. Like, we'll break it down and, go over maybe why it's historically inaccurate. But like, I will never judge a movie or a book for getting people in that room. And that's how I like try to like give myself a little bit of grace. Like my love of the Da Vinci Code at first.
It's fine. You know what? It doesn't hit as hard because I don't study Mary and I'm not, any kind of Hebrew Bible scholar. But you know what? I love that movie and I always will, even though it's wrong. Yeah. But I don't care.
Yeah. I think it was like the mystery of it. Like just being able to like pull these mysteries from a text or a painting. Like that was so intriguing, right? Like, yeah, there was something really magical about watching that movie and seeing someone interpret it, however wrongly, based on what they were seeing, for instance, in a painting, right? Like that just, it spoke to a young, curious mind. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, okay, what is it? You know that one saying that they say about Life of Brian, where they're like, oh, tell me what scene's your favorite, and then I can tell you whether you're like a historian or you're an archaeologist or linguist or whatever. I kind of feel like Da Vinci Code is the movie you could use to be like, okay, so depending on what scene is your favorite, I'll tell you whether you're a historian or an art historian.
Yeah.
Because it's so funny. Because I do kind of ask people what their favorite scene is, and I'm always like, well, I kind of like the art history scene the most.
You know what's funny? It's like you would never know I was an archaeologist if you asked me that question about the life of Brian, because hands down, I love the scene where it's like the Romans go home scene. Like, I live for that moment.
Okay. Interesting. It's okay. I mean, you know what? Not everyone actually falls into those categories. But I don't know, it's kind of like the stupid, like, most basic litmus test that not everyone needs to pass anyway. It's, broad categorizations.
Right.
Yeah. And I will say, it wasn't that exact movie that got me into it, but when I was in undergrad as well, decided on a whim that I was going to take a Greek art and archaeology class, and the professor ended up being my favorite professor. Like, I love her so much. So I ended up picking up a minor in art history and archaeology because I was like, this is so cool. And if I had more time and space in my brain that was not devoted to my classics major, I would maybe try to double major, but no, I did not. Also, I didn't want to take like the mandatory like modern art classes. I was like, no, I only want ancient. I don't like modern stuff, so I don't want to pick up the rest of the requirements. Sorry, too hard. But
I don't blame you.
So I was like, if you could only let me take the ancient classes, this would be great. And they were like, well, we only offer a very select few, enough to get you your like 6 classes for the minor, but they were kind of like, you will have to pick more. And I was like, never mind, I'm out, I will just minor. But okay, so we have Da Vinci Code, which is like the big one that I think most people think of when you think of stories that really involve Mary. Are there any others that you know of that sort of prominently feature Mary in any kind of way that also isn't like overtly just like meant to be a religious movie?
Yeah, not really. I mean, the only other one that comes to mind, and she's not even in it that much, is Gibbs' The Passion.
Oh, is she in Passion of the Christ?
I don't know. I don't even know. Like, that's the only one that even came to mind that like maybe she'd be in. But it's been, I don't even know how long since I've seen that movie. But no, really, there are hardly any. Wait,
wasn't there that like one movie made a few years ago? It was the title was like Mary Magdalene or something. There was that one movie that was all about Mary Magdalene. I feel like it was like Emma Watson starring as Mary Magdalene.
Oh, maybe I don't even think I've seen that.
I didn't either.
I have not seen it.
Okay, I was like, yeah, I haven't seen anything. Yeah, I was like, I don't quote me on it because I was like, I didn't see it. I just, because I feel like it came out around 2017 or 18 or something like that. And the only reason I would have known is because that was the year, the academic year 17-18, which was my final year in undergrad. And that's when I lived with my roommate. And that's when, because we just happened to be talking a lot about religion that year, she probably was like, oh, there's this movie, it's coming out and I'm going to see it. Do you want to see it? And I was probably like, hell no, but thanks. And if she did invite me, I should have gone because I would have liked to have that as a frame of reference for now. But oh well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to look into it because if there is, I need to watch it.
If there is, you definitely need to watch it. And you know what? I will do my best to find it as well. And if I find something, I'll send it to you as well. But, okay. As you've mentioned, there's Troy, there's 300, there's a bunch of great films that you can watch if you want to get into classics. Like, so many. Both on the Greek side and the Roman side. And there's mythological stuff. And even for Egypt, there's a lot. For people who actually want to study more in either the biblical studies realm or anything else, especially like for the stuff you do, like, are there anything that's good that you would just recommend to people? Or would you have to send them to something sort of more adjacent and hope that they come back?
I mean, there are movies that were made, but I don't think I would recommend any, mostly because I don't want to promote certain directors, let's put it that way. But no, I think that when it comes to biblical movies, you're dealing with a big Hollywood blockbuster made by a really problematic human, or you're dealing with more documentaries, right? And a lot of these documentaries, I mean, they would work, but there's not sort of one in particular that I generally assign. And I think maybe that's because I haven't actually taught religious studies, which is wild. I like have PhD in religious studies. All of my research is in religious studies, and then I will be going. This is my 7th year teaching at Simon Fraser University, and it's my very first time in the spring coming up that I'll be teaching a religious studies course. So I was hired to teach all the Greek and Roman archaeology classes. So most of my like film-based knowledge comes from that, because I've never really had to like think about pedagogically using these other sort of more religious-based movies. So I actually have to really think about that, especially in preparation for this class I'm teaching. So thanks,
I mean,
Lexi.
it's valid. Yeah, I mean, you're welcome. It's valid because, I mean, you know, as you've said, the Greek and Roman stuff is really awesome. Classics is really awesome. But since it's not actually what your more formal training is, do you kind of feel like a fish out of water? Not like super out of water, but like, do you still almost feel like being in your classics department or whatever? Is it? Or do you still feel sort of adjacent because that's not formally what you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. And the answer to that is mostly no. And I think that's because I'm not in a classics department. So I'm based mostly in the Department of Global Humanities, and then a quarter appointment in archaeology. So neither of which have a really formal classics training. I have one colleague in my Global Humanities department who is a classicist. And then in the archaeology department, I'm the only person who goes anywhere near Greece or Rome. So I'm kind of a fish out of water in that sense, in that really there's very few people around me who do the same kind of work, which is what makes our department unique. It can also be a little bit isolating, but I think too, because my MA is in classical archaeology and I've worked on classical sites and I'm still an active field archaeologist, that in that sense, like I'm really happy teaching these classes. But it's going to be very nice to switch over to teaching some more religious studies classes.
That's really interesting. And, I'm sure that it also varies by like what university you're at. And it sounds like you got pretty lucky and didn't just land in a place that kind of was a bit more one dimensional and said, well, we can only really accommodate this. The name sort of sounds inherently more friendly if you say sort of, global humanities. You're like, okay, I don't know what that means, but it sounds welcoming because now it doesn't sound so pigeonholed into, I mean, because let's be honest, when you say classics, you think, okay, Greece and Rome.
Yeah.
What else is there? Right.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately for most people, they're shoved into, depending on size of university, right? You get shoved into history. I know classes who are shoved into departments of like modern romance languages or something. And you're like, okay, that really doesn't sound like any place that I belong. So I feel like, so many scholars of the ancient world are kind of having to adapt to something that's not their thing, but like close enough. So exactly. I'm always a little interested in, how people kind of are dealing with it. But I'm very happy for you that you're going to get to move more into what you actually want to do. And it sounds like there's going to be some really great classes coming up that,
Yes. Yeah. Well, we're really trying to build a religious studies minor in the department, and we just hired someone else who does Byzantine material culture, who has some religious studies training, and we hired a lecturer specifically for religious studies. So like now there's like a smaller group of us, and we're all really excited to like focus some of our energy into building this minor. So I could not be more thrilled. But like I love teaching Greece and Rome. Like that is my favorite thing to do. Like the students are amazing, they get so into it. But truly, it'll be a joy to like actually get to talk about my own research. I teach Rome and I'm like, so the very last class, this is sort of where I start to become relevant. We go through a whole semester, but now I know what I'm talking about. We get to Constantine.
Well, because there's never enough time, and it sucks because I remember I went through a whole class for Greek. What was it? It was like Greek sculpture. It was something. But I remember we spent, a decent chunk of time on sort of the early Bronze Age stuff. We spent most of our time, most of our time on the classical period. And then we had maybe a month left to go, and they were like, okay, so now we're going to cram in all of the 4th century and then have like one lecture on late antiquity. And I was like, what?
Yep.
Wait, what? Why? We had a whole semester. And they're like, there's just not enough time, and there are too many artifacts in the classical period. And then I was like really sad. And then I started asking around at, for different friends in different classes and different institutions. And I was so shocked and saddened to hear it's kind of the same story, which is we barely have enough time to get to Alexander unless you take a class specifically on kind of like Alexander, but no one really ever wants to go past that. And if you're lucky, you might have one Byzantine class, which I did discover my senior year. We did have a class on Byzantine art, which, believe me, I took because I was like, I'm taking this. But yeah, no, it's really sad that we don't have enough sort of time to devote, even with professors who can teach it. They don't have time.
No, we don't have time. There's so much to cover, and it's hard too when, universities aren't hiring anymore, right? So you've got fewer and fewer people trying to cram more and more in. So
I know. Well, and then there's the whole problem of universities who, if they're lucky enough to hire more than like 3 full-time professors to teach or whatever, they normally never get to teach their own research or anything because they're all busy teaching like the big myth class or the introductory Greek Civ, Roman Civ class, because that's all they can really accommodate. Because you get the tired old argument of, well, you'll get a very well attended 300-400 person class of basic myth because people will enjoy it, but if you want to teach that upper level class on something really sort of not popular, they're like, you're gonna have like 10 people if you're lucky, and you're like, oh, that sucks. So it's a problem that I don't know how we fix, but I hope it gets better. But I did want to ask you about your work with people in the past.
Oh yeah.
So we've talked to your colleague Chelsea Gardner a little bit about how you guys started up and what she does. So if you could tell us how you got involved with the project and what you do, that would be great.
Yeah, so I was one of the founding members of Peopling the Past, along with my colleagues Chelsea, Melissa, Carolyn, Megan, Christine, and then we added in Vicky. And it just basically started out on Twitter, which is so random. I'm sure Chelsea went into the whole, sort of mythology of Peopling the Past, if you will, but we just all happened to be friends who did our MAs/PhDs at the same place at the same time. And, we were thinking through the pandemic, like, how are we going to shift online and what are our priorities? And Chelsea and Carolyn had the really, brilliant idea of starting a podcast. And then Christy jumped in saying, well, what if we also included, videos as teaching tools? And then Megan thought, oh, okay, a blog would be amazing too. And so these 3 sort of unique ideas came together to be the Peopling the Past project. And so I had some experience managing digital humanities or just project websites in the past. So my main role for the project is sort of the webmaster. So anything that goes up on the Peopling the Past website, that's me. So everyone puts the content, in a file, and I upload it all and make it look really pretty, manage the website. And then if you're emailing Peopling the Past, you're usually corresponding with me. So I also manage sort of the back end correspondence of it all. And then, we all sort of regularly contribute to the various things when needed. So, I've done a podcast episode on Mary, which you can go listen to if you want a more formal discussion of what I do. I also have some research interests on Thecla. So I did a video on Thecla and female agency. And then I wrote a blog post for Megan as well. So sort of sometimes contributor, and then also kind of helping find people to contribute to the project, especially because Megan is, she's prolific with her blog posts. And there's one every Friday almost for the entire year. So anything we can do to help alleviate the stress of constantly reaching out to people, we do.
That's pretty cool. I love how it just started as a group of people who kind of knew each other at one part in their formal education. And then it's really cool that you guys kind of wanted to keep working together and staying in touch, and now you're producing stuff that hopefully the general public will really, really like, but also educators who are looking for content to, because in this wacky post-pandemic world, right, it seems like people never have enough time to kind of fully put what they want, and then they're always looking for more resources. So it's kind of nice if you can sort of produce that and have it ready to go for someone else.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most important things that like I personally have been using the project for and like have benefited from like my colleagues' work is that, at this day and age, like you really need to have a syllabus that is extremely diverse in order to engage your students more fully. And so like for me, I can't just have a syllabus full of readings anymore. I mean, it doesn't work with the way my students are learning. And so having this kind of content where I can give them videos or podcasts to listen to kind of break up the monotony of just doing readings has been so instrumental in guiding how I want to see my classes moving forward and creating this like really like multivocal environment that they can engage in.
Well, I will always say I love multimedia engagement with students. But yeah, I would say, I had 1 or 2 classes that had some sort of interactive video element to it. And I did actually really like that. I just wish that it had been in my classics courses because, of course, it was like the one psychology class I took. We had many videos to watch. And I was like, this is amazing.
Right?
Just not for what I want to study.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. But like, I feel like there's so many amazing projects. I mean, outside of people in the past now that are doing this kind of work that are like you guys, I mean, everyone is truly contributing to creating a much more inclusive and diverse and like broader conception of what classics is, and like being able to draw on all of these different sources and projects has been amazing at moving our field forward.
And I hope to keep seeing more people sort of jump in and help diversify it more. I mean, I just love how it is kind of exploded, especially because so many people's pandemic babies were like outreach things. Like we were already trending, but it's exploded and I love to see it. So I was really happy with. I never really was a classics Twitter person before, and then I was like stuck at home suddenly, and I was like, you know what? Let me just see what people are saying. I wonder, and then discovered like the whole ecosystem of people doing things, and so it was so exciting to see so many projects like burst onto the scene, and then you're like, this is so cool.
I can't use all of them because they're so many and they're all so amazing. Yeah, no, it's incredible.
Right. I mean, like, I'm not like super old yet, but I'm also not like, I'm not Gen Z. I'm not super young either. But I remember, because when I was coming through, I remember I got to read Percy Jackson in 7th or 8th grade. So I was like 12 or 13. So I was like right in the age when they wanted to catch people. And I remember being like, oh, this is great. But it still kind of felt a bit limited because it was one of the only things like I really had that tangibly was sort of in that category at that time. And then I just look at all the books and all the things now and I'm like, whoa, what I could have done if these were published when I was that age. So I'm sure it's even more like that if you're a bit older than I am, then I'm sure you'd be like, I wish we even had that. So
we had nothing.
Yeah, so there are just a couple of questions that I want to ask to sort of end this interview portion of the episode, because I could stay and talk about, the media stuff and more for ages, but you and I would both be like 100 and dead before we finished, so I won't even attempt to do that. So the first question is, when you were in school, and then you can use your undergrad or your grad experience, whatever stage you would like, did you attend office hours?
Always. But I was that annoying kid that was like, I know I'm going to go to grad school and I know that these professors need to know my name. So if I'm going to get a reference letter from them, I am just going to go show up and ask whatever question is on my mind. And sometimes I think that was to my detriment because I really had no business being there. But no, I always went. And I think it was really important to build those relationships with my professors. And it's the same sentiment I extend to my students now. Like, I hold office hours for you guys to come. Like, come see me. It's really important for like us to get to know each other. And, if you're not coming to office hours, then, I can't see where you're struggling or where you might need more help. Or, if you don't need help in the class, like, what do you want to improve on more broadly? Like, how can we work on some other skills that might be beneficial to you? So yeah, I always encourage students to go. Please.
Great. I mean, I have no room to talk because I was the annoying kid who lived in my professor's office hours too. But also, my professor had a chocolate drawer and a very comfy couch, and she was like a grandma. So, of course, I was going to live there. I mean, who wouldn't?
I feel like I need a chocolate drawer for my office now. You're getting ideas.
I always suggested to anyone I talk, I'm like, do you have a chocolate drawer? Because if you don't, you need to get on my professor's level. I mean, she's retired now. So actually, we need more people who will, start the chocolate drawer tradition wherever they are. So I would.
Yes,
please.
I would. I aspire to be the kind of person that my students run to their office to. I think it says a lot about you as a professor and how you engage with your students when you can have that kind of relationship. And I really hope that my students see me in that light.
Oh yeah, I think it's something to be striven for, because my professor, not only did she have the chocolate drawer and great advice about being a classics major and potential career paths forward if I didn't want to go to grad school for classics, she was there to teach you anything. I remember I burst into her classroom, and then she walked me to her office, and then I burst into tears, and she was like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I'm going to go to jail because I don't know how to do my taxes, and I think they're going to come after me." So then she literally asked if I would be interested in her teaching me how to do my taxes. And
oh
I
my
said
gosh.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So love her. She's amazing. I'm very sad she's retired, but yes. Yeah. So, and the second question is, as either an undergrad who went to office hours, or you can actually draw on an example as a professor yourself, if you would like. Do you have any kind of fun, memory or experience, conversation, anything that stood out to you from an office hours experience yourself? And this can be both a formal office hour or an informal one.
Off the top of my head, I can't. I've spent a lot of time in offices. Mine and the professor. There's got to be something. I mean, I just have really fond memories of a professor I had at the University of Ottawa. She had the shared office with 4 other profs, and they would always be in there, but hers would always be chocked full of students just sitting around practicing Latin with her. And I just remember going to her office hours. First of all, if you're listening to this, shout out Heather Loeb. She was just kind of that same very maternal figure where you could go to her for anything, and she would sit there in her office with you for hours working through your Latin questions, well beyond her regular office hours. And the students would just pour in there because she was such a wonderful, caring human. And then I spent so much time in her office as an undergraduate student, left to do my MA at UBC, and then came back to the University of Ottawa for my PhD. And we actually started our PhDs at the same time. And we knew each other so well because we'd spent so much time together in her office that she became my PhD bestie. This maternal woman whose office I spent so much time in as an undergrad, really became my closest friend and confidant throughout my PhD. So maybe that's my story.
Oh, that's so adorable. No, I love it when a certain professor makes their office kind of like a very warm and comfy cocoon that you just feel nurtured in, that you can grow and be safe, and then you can come out and be like, yes, now I know how to do the thing. I'm prepared. So, that's lovely. I do love those warm and comfy environments. I don't want to say they're rare, but they're kind of rare.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's not a lot of people who go out of their way to really create that kind of environment, right?
Yeah. It's really sad. I hope that changes. Anyway, at the end of each podcast, I ask each guest if they will read Shelley's Ozymandias poem, a nice cold reading, if you will. And now this is a poem that people have consistently cited as something they think is, particularly well written and has particularly interesting concepts or meanings. And so I would just be interested to know whether you agree with sort of this sentiment Yeah. So whenever you're ready.
Okay. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." So when I read this, actually, instead of sort of evaluating its content or what I thought about it, it actually just took me back to a moment in our class the other day where we gave students a cold reading of a text that they'd never seen before. And I kind of wanted to treat this in the same way and like think about it from a pedagogical standpoint and like how we engage with texts that we've never seen before. You know, it was really interesting to me, you know, as someone reading this poem for the first time today, having never engaged with it before, how would I deal with it? And yeah, remind me literally this exercise we did last Wednesday with my Greek world class, where we gave them a funeral epitaph. They'd never looked at it. They weren't able to look anything up and like try to figure out how to break that down, work through a text based on nothing. So for me, this was interesting because, I mean, what I do know is who this text is meant to be based on, and right, Ramses II. And it really took me to a place of trying to think about Shelley writing about a statue of Ramses II that's being extracted from its location, right? Where there's literally nothing of what he would consider nothing of value left, right? And the ways in which we often sort of glorify particular ancient empires, and the Egyptians in particular, for their massive building projects. And then to kind of reflect on the fact that in many cases, very little is left, but also who's to blame for that. And this notion of nothing being left is a product of centuries, of millennia of decay, but also pillaging, rampant colonialism. And so I think that maybe that's not necessarily the intention of what Shelley was trying to write here, but for me, it's sort of, this poem forces you to reflect on the whole cultural history of a statue surrounding monuments, not simply that there's nothing left, but what causes there to be nothing left, which is, of course, you know, a multitude of factors.
Yeah. No, I mean, I do love thinking about the context in which Shelley was writing this. I mean, and I think I read somewhere that he ended up penning this poem after he learned that the statue that they had found in Egypt was about to be transported to London to the British Museum. So yes. I think he knew that it was already coming and decided he would write a poem about it in preparation for its arrival. So I was like, oh, well, that's like peak colonialist. Isn't it? like, oh, great, statue being taken out of its homeland, coming to be in your museum, and you're going to celebrate it by writing a poem. Woo!
About nothing being left. Yeah, I mean, it's peak colonialism.
Yeah. But also, I think of this poem as like a memento mori kind of, it does. I do love how in 14 lines, he manages to talk about not only the context in which, surrounding him writing it, but also just this idea of monumentality and legacy and power structures. We can even stretch that too. And yeah, that's a really powerful mix of things you can get into 14 lines.
Absolutely,
that's the artistry, right, in which is used to write it is quite impressive. You know, if I was asked to do something, I could not achieve that. I'm no poet, so, and I don't know many that could, so it is quite incredible. Although it's funny because I've had many people just say, you know, as cool as Shelley was, no, his wife Mary Shelley was even more impressive because she basically invented science fiction by writing Frankenstein. So take that, Percy. So I was like, okay, well, it's a battle of the Shelleys, but in terms of Percy Shelley's beautiful poem, because it talks about such amazing themes that are quite deep and quite heavy and quite long lasting. The last question I ask every single guest on my show is, if you consider our world right now, our societies right now, do we have like a modern Ozymandias-like figure or thing, you know, so something that we kind of think is like super awesome and amazing, and you know, realistically, will future humans agree with us with our assessment, or will they be like, you know, looking back like, oh man, they're crazy. What was that?
That is a really great question. I was not prepared to answer this. It's funny because when I think about this question, you know, things that are long lasting, my mind automatically goes to the ancient world, but that's like the complete opposite of what you were asking. And I think maybe that's because the present feels so in flux.
I mean, and the way I hope to make it easier is like, it doesn't have to be one person or object. This could be as abstract as an idea, like anything.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the one idea that comes to mind, something that's becoming sort of more monumental, more important, and something I hope that future generations will look back on and being like, these people were on something, was just the fact that there are so many young people, especially now, who are really fighting for the environment. And I think maybe that's our lasting legacy right now, because that's something, I mean, as you know now, living in California and as British Columbia has witnessed this year, rampant wildfires, you know, just the catastrophic events of climate change. And I'm really hoping that these young environmental stewards that we're seeing pushing notions of environmental justice will be the legacy of our generation.
I mean, I hope so. I hope people step up, and I hope that the initiatives they're pushing for are seen as being actually helpful and not just performative.
Yes.
Because if it's performative, we're definitely going to be like, why were they doing that? So, yeah, no, good answer. You know, again, I asked this question at the end because I love how open-ended it is. And, you know, there's no right answer because we don't want one answer. That would be boring. So yeah, no, I think that's a good as an answer as any. And I kind of lied. There is one more question I'm going to ask you, and that's, where can people find you and your work?
Oh, well, you already mentioned Peopling the Past. So if you want to check out our collaborative project, you can find us at peoplingthepast.com or at Peopling the Past on any social media channel. My personal Twitter is at Sabrina Caitlin. That's where I do more of my academic sort of public-facing scholarship. And you can also look out, I don't know if Chelsea mentioned it, but our volume, Ancient Past for Modern Audiences, will be submitted beginning of 2024. So if you're interested in sort of the interface of public scholarship and pedagogy and museums and digital humanities, then that is going to be a really interesting collected volume with so many wonderful, really thoughtful contributors. So yeah, that will hopefully come out end of 2024, early 2025.
Great. Well, it'll definitely be forthcoming by the time this episode releases, because I think, yeah. So we will link, I believe, I mean, I'm hoping that there will be like a little page that says, you know, pre-order or something. So if that's available, we will link it. And I will make sure to link the Peopling the Past stuff. And then I can also link your faculty profile.
Oh gosh,
and,
yeah.
And do you have an academia page?
I do, yeah. Just Sabrina Higgins on academia, although it's getting harder to post materials there. So it's tough. I mean, I wish more scholarship was open access, but what I have that is open access and available is there.
Great. Well, we'll link it all. So if anyone wants to find you and all the wonderful things, they will know where to go. Because I'm sure that there will be other people who are definitely interested in reading and hearing and seeing what someone does who studies the cult of Mary. Because come on, that's pretty cool to say because that's like pretty specialized. Not a lot of people can just be like, yeah, this is what I study. This is what I do.
Yeah, it's very niche.
Exactly. So, and those are sometimes the coolest. So, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, this has been so fun. So, hopefully we'll be able to do something with you in the future.
Would love that. Thanks for having me, Lexi.
Trireme Transit is now departing ancient office hours. Next stop is Present Ponderings.